Texas used to have this thing about the Public Information Act, PIA. It kept getting abbreviated as PIA. And it has this sort of feminine underwriting. And at some point, some dimension, whether they like to admit it or not, when one person took over the Army and the Air Force as part of his private militia, and the other person took over the Marine Corps and the Navy as part of his private militia. And then they did some, acts of, speculation back and forth. They started putting in process this little scheme where they took Boeing case law concerning an area of San Antonio that on a map actually looks like an inverted triangle. Not very angular, kind of curved, almost like a uterus. And started talking about trade secrets and proprietary privacy or proprietary information. There was big litigation, and it had the guy who was the attorney general's name all over it. And depending upon who filed the suit and who filed the countersuit, it's Boeing versus Abbott or Abbott versus Boeing. And I've tracked for 3 years how they use that and case law connected to whistleblowers associated with the ISDs as part of the Ethics Public Information Code, which is basically the automation for their racket to finance their hedges for the state and the retirement system. They did all of these different kinds of changes that make a pretty nice little game if you're into that sort of thing. If you're actually trying to deal with law and order and you're actually trying to deal with due process and you're actually trying to deal with having a civic participation and or safe society, it doesn't fucking do anything close to that. What it does is it gives a sort of competitive edge to people that allow themselves to see human beings as nothing more than commodities to be brokered between others. Maybe somebody, I don't know, that's really heavily invested in cattle futures. Or maybe somebody that didn't agree with West Texas with that whole compromise situation and really wanted to get in good with the other plantation owners and had no problem creating a buffer zone between America and Mexico when it came to leveraging federal assets for use in their local domains. That mentality seems to have persisted for a long time, and in lieu of any appropriate Texas social studies education, then what we get is a big old gangbang using the public pension system. And at some point, somebody decided to make Pia Putin's wife. Literally. They thought it was cute. Make the Public Information Act Putin's wife. And sometime last year, they decided to silence her. Now, I don't get into people's wives, especially heads of state. I've got this weird sort of like old-fashioned part of me where it's kind of like somebody's wife or somebody's spouse is off limits. I don't know what this is. It's just this part of me. Their spouse, whether it's a woman or a man, if they're in the public view, if they're in public office, that's one thing. But their spouse is like the spouse is different. I don't know why. It's always been the way I've been. If your spouse runs for Senate, that's different. But if your spouse is your partner, there's a very specific role that this person plays when it comes to statesmanship or statespersonship. And I have this, the spouse is off limits. That's not the way they do it. That's not the way they do it. They like to drive each other's wives around. They like to lean on each other's wives, and some of them even like to swap their wives out. Now, I understand at some point in time, the woman that was actually married to Vladimir Putin and him separated. She's doing her thing, and he's one of the world's most eligible bachelors. If this is just some sort of propaganda that has been, characterized in this particular locality when I've done this research as a way to try to promulgate some sort of rationale, it may well be the case, whether it's coming from Russia or whether it's coming from here. That's not so much the point. The point of the matter was that Texas took a very concerted stand to make sure those Russian women knew to keep their mouths shut. Whether they were Russian or not was not the point. Whether they were Ukrainian or not was not the point. If you had been characterized as a Russian asset for the purposes of laundering assets under the cover of the State Department in order to make sure that we help rejuvenate the gas and oil sector, because Texas loves its gas and oil sector. You need to keep quiet. And it's not about whether you personally actually knew what the hell was going on. They coded the state to be quiet by completely misrepresenting what confidentiality means. And part of the way they did that was by manipulating this case law, specifically concerning Boeing and the attorney who was at the time the Attorney General of Texas. And in the process of doing that, they have created something that is so mammoth and monstrous that it is almost like a diabolicism in and on itself. Now, at some point, somebody decided that because I went after somebody and requested prosecution, or at least an investigation into potential prosecution of somebody for their relationship to Central America, that it was okay to flip it so that all of a sudden I'm a Russian asset. It's never come up in my life before. Did they try to backdate it to make it look like things I'd done in the past that characterized me as a Russian asset? They may well have. Was I actually used as a Russian asset since when I was young? Well, there does seem to be some evidence to that effect. But it doesn't change the fact that I specifically requested, based on firsthand information I had as an observer, based on investigation I had done after I've been an investigative journalist in the past, and also based on an understanding that there were contemporaneously political movements within the United States and in other countries that, regardless of whether or not I agreed with their political aims, had justifiable cause for demanding an inquiry into abuse of power. And as a result of that, I got subsumed and attempted for enticement and extortion into agreeing to support somebody else's political campaign. And when I said no, I'm here now. This little wife-bashing gangbang shit needs to have an end. It needs to end. If you are a wife and you kept your mouth shut, all you did was fuck it up for the rest of us. If you thought that you could just play along and support your man or support your woman while they play this, and that you could get some sort of layer of protection to protect you, while the rest of us were supposed to be used as chattel mortgages so that you could take a weekend reprieve to us while we fucking worked your goddamn land over here as it was being invaded by fucking terrorists, that's not acceptable. It's completely unacceptable. If I was in office, or even if I wasn't, and somebody went after my spouse, I would consider it to be a threat of harm to me and my family. If you ever tried to get me to agree to swap my spouse out with yours as part of the game, I would hold you criminally responsible. But at the same time, we're also talking about international factors. And I am in the United States. In Texas and the United States, it is illegal to dispossess people from their inheritance just because they're a fucking woman. And that's what you guys have been doing. You like to take women that don't sexually perform on command as part of your pipeline and pretend we're assets of some country that has been projected as having some paternalistic relationship with womanhood, so that we have to accede to understanding that when we are dispossessed here, that it has this increasingly, this disproportionate impact on women's rights in other countries and the safety and danger women are exposed to in other countries. And the inverse is we have to go to this extreme where LGBT civil rights becomes a rallying cry for the fact that abuse of power in this country is so comprehensive that they've literally engaged a practical form of human slavery under the auspices of manipulations that they feel they're justified in getting away with because they have immunity of one sort or another, whether it's sovereign immunity or governmental immunity or transactional immunity. There's so many different kinds of immunity that give them that impunity. And it has created a malaise. It has created a sickness in this country that has global ramifications. I apologize if you're the wife of somebody that's been elected to public office, but there's no fucking way I'm gonna be your Secret Service detail. I'm letting you know right now. If you thought you were going to waste my life and you were going to avail yourself of the benefits of trafficking me because you saw another wife of a politician do it in pursuit of her personal political goals, you're warned. You're no longer the First Lady, and you're no longer the First Gentleman.